I'm going to give you your first programming assignment. So the first programming assignment is going to be the trip cost calculator. I couldn't remember what it was. So the trip cost calculator, the way we talked about it, although I'm going to talk a little bit more specifics about how to implement it, how to create it, what I want. So there is on Blackboard a little thing where it says programming exercise 1, trip cost calculator, due Thursday, October 1st during your lab. There will be more. I will be adding some more details here for you to reference. And I'll do that as soon as lab is done. Excuse me. Had a hiccup. So there will be an assignment here. Also, I'm going to talk about it in lab, so I'm going to post today's lecture and today's lab probably tomorrow. So I'll have those videos up. So having said that, what is it that we're supposed to do? Well, let's see. Let me minimize this. There we go. And let me start off, how do we create a program? Because a lot of people, this is the part where you have to get on the bicycle and ride it. So a lot of people are nervous about creating a program from scratch. So I'm going to try to get rid of those nerves as much as possible. So the first thing that we have to remember is we need to get into our idle. So I'm just going to double click on this. And that will start my Python shell. And because I'm actually creating an assignment that I would like to keep and not just running a command line like this, right? That's just a command line. I want to be able to save this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the File menu, and I'm going to click New File. Poof. And I get a window, and up here in the title bar, it says Untitled. So I'm going to name it. So I'm just going to click on File and go Save As. And then I went to my desktop. So, but I'm going to give it a file name. So I might call it, what is it, trip cost? Trop, not trop, trip. Trip cost program. And if I were you, I would create a folder. If you haven't done so already, create a folder. I keep the stuff that I access all the time on my desktop, so that's why I'm on my desktop, but you can create the folder wherever you want. And you can just click New Folder if you don't have one already, and then name it. Open it, and then click Save. Poof. Now, I don't have any code, but it should be here. So if I look at my desktop, and here is the folder that I just created. If I double click on it, I should see trip cost program. It's there. So it's saved correctly. It's a Python file. And now I don't have to worry about saving it anymore. I can just start typing things into my, oops, not there. I need to maximize my window again. There we are. So now I can just start typing stuff. And when we write code, one of the things that is normal to do is to add remarks to your code. And I'll show you the Drake equation program again, because that one has a lot of remarks. But I'm going to show you this one. So the first couple of things that I want are for me. So when we do a remark, we do a number sign and then a space. And so I want three things. I want your name. So I want your first name and last name, please. Yours, not mine. That happens to be my name. So that's one remark. Then I'm going to have a second remark. I want to know what lab you're in. So you are in 2:30. So I'm just going to type here 2:30 p.m. I don't need the section number. I don't need anything else because I don't know what the section numbers are by heart. I just, whatever time it starts is perfectly fine. And then I want the month and the year. So if you're working on it now, it would be September 2020. You don't have to give me the day because I don't care whether you were working on the assignment on Friday or on Saturday or Sunday or next Wednesday. It doesn't matter to me. Then give me 2 spaces. And then we can go on and add remarks that are normal for programs. So all programs have in the code, have a remark for the program. Basically, it's a description of what the program does. And yeah, there you go. Basically, it's just a description of what the program does. So we're going to do that trip cost calculator. So I would type something like this program calculates the cost of a trip or figures out how much it costs to go to a certain place or to travel a certain distance. Using user input. So there are 3 pieces of user input that we have. We have distance, miles per gallon, and cost per gallon. And that would be a decent enough remark. Now let me show you. Oh, by the way, when you add change or you make changes to your program, when you click run and run module, or you just press the F5 key, and you've made changes to it, it will prompt you to save those changes before you run the program. So if you look in the title bar up here, it says trip cost program PY desktop, and it's showing me where it is. So that means that I've already given it a name. I already know where it is. So I can just press OK. And it ran it. Now, there's no code to actually execute, so there's nothing here. And if I add something else, so I'm just going to add a couple of remarks here, a remark line. And I run it again, it knows that I've changed it. And see, it says, do you want to save it? Yes, it must be saved before it can run. So it will always prompt you, if you've made changes to your program, to save those changes once you try to run it. Okay, now having said that, I want to open the Drake program, the Drake equation program, because I want to show you what they're doing. So I added this to mine, right? Those are the 3 things that I want, and there's a double space. And then they have a lot of comments, description here. And the reason they have so much is because of the way they named their variables. So, and that it's kind of complicated. So this part is just because, actually this part is just because they named their variables individual letters and we can't tell what they are. So we're probably not going to have to do that. We probably don't have to do this bit either, which is even more detail. We're probably going to end up with something that's closer to this, where it says, you know, SETI program, this program lets the user blah, blah, blah. And so 2 or 3 sentences is perfectly fine. What else? So that's kind of how we start every program. We have some remarks. Then we get to the point where we have to actually start displaying things onto the screen. So we're actually going to start running code, or writing code, I should say. And we do remark each section of our code. So there are more remarks here, but they aren't very long. You can see I have a couple of 4 or 5 lines of remarks. And there are 4 kind of sections, 4 things that we do when we're doing programs that use calculations. So the first part, which I also want you to do, is to create kind of a welcome. And so that's this display welcome part up here. That's this section right here. So the remark for that is just to display the welcome. And what is the welcome? Well, the welcome is, or consists of, what the program does. It's kind of like the description that we added in our code, but it tells the user, hey, this is a trip calculating program. It does blah, blah, blah. And then we want to give kind of user instructions. So for this one, we would just, because they have to input 3 things, right? We would just say, hey, you have to input the distance traveled, the miles per gallon that you got for that trip, and the cost per gallon that you paid for the gasoline that you used on this trip. And what that does is it tells, when I run this, it tells the program, it tells the user, how to use it. Here, the instructions are, all percentages should be entered as integer values. For example, 40 and not 0.40. So that's important to know if I'm using this program, how to enter that input. So that's why it's here. And it says this program will allow you to enter specific values related to the likelihood of finding intelligent life in our galaxy. Welcome to the SETI program. So that's kind of the first part. We just want to tell the user, hey, this is the program that's going to do this, and this is how you use it. So the way we do that is we use the print command. So the print command will show whatever is in the parentheses after the print command. And it, by the way, it's in parentheses. So welcome to the SETI program. This program will allow you to enter specific values related to, and notice how that's not the end of the sentence. I just cut it manually. Again, the reason being that we don't want our sentences to be too wide, because it'll cause, when it runs, it'll cause it to go off the edge, right? And so I don't want the user to have to make this super wide. Come on. Why can't I make it? I can never get on that side. Come on. It's not letting me. I don't know why it's not. Oh, maybe it's because it's on top of the other one. There we go. I don't want to have to, have them make it so wide that, and resize it just to read what's on it. So that's why with the Drake, with this program, they are breaking their sentences. See here, it just says all percentages should be, and that's a separate print function, because each one of these controls what is going to be shown on each individual line. And by the way, what does this show? This last one here, line 36, what does that show? He asked. Anybody? Hello? Guys home? It shows a blank line. Yes, extra space. So, right, because whatever is after the print function command, whatever's in those parentheses is what's going to show up. So if I want to make my program look nicer, and I want a blank space between this and this, I want a double space, an extra line, then that's why that's there. And by the way, there's one here too, and that puts a blank line after this. So let's run it and see what happens, and let me move this. Oh, I have my chat up over here, so let me move it over here. go. And then I can run this and show the code at the same time. If I don't make it as wide as I made it earlier. Ah, come on. There we go. I'm trying to move stuff a little bit. There. Okay. So what happens? So the welcome part shows up. Created. It's this second one because I did it twice. And then what percentage of stars do you think have planets? So that's here. What percentage of stars do you think have planets? Line 41. And you can see that there's a double space in there because of this print line here. So you can see that there's a little double space. Makes it easier to read and to understand what's going on. Now, so after we have displayed the welcome, we've done that welcome section. That's step one. There are 4 steps. So I've got step 1 out of the way. I have 3 more to go. The second step is kind of, we create variables, we assign values to the variables, we get user input to assign the values to the variables, right? So there's a couple of things going on there. And you can see on the first line, line 41 here, you can see that I've created a variable called P. It's an integer variable. And I'm creating an input line so that the user can type something in and it'll get put into the value that they type in will be put into that memory spot. And I type out, what percentage of stars do you think have planets? That's the question that I'm asking. And notice this little space here. That's always nice to have an extra space in the quotation marks because it moves the insertion point over one space. So again, it's not butted up against the colon that I have here. Now, in our program, we only have 3 pieces of user input, whereas this one has 6. So there's going to be a couple of differences. A, we're only going to have 3 lines instead of 6 lines. B, I don't want you to use individual letters. Because if you do use like A, B, C, D, or ABC, I should say, because there's only 3, then you have to define what they are in this section up here. Right? And we don't want to do that. So we're going to have distance, so you might as well just type out distance traveled. And when you create a name, I'll type it in here. No spaces are allowed. You can use an underscore between words. I tend to, it's not technically correct in Python. I tend to capitalize the first letters of each word. It'll work just fine. It's just not technically correct. The book, I think if you look at the chapter, it will tell you to use all lowercase with underscores between the words. I just don't like underscores because it's another time I have to press shift. But I can do distance traveled. That explains to me what the variable is being used for just by looking at the name. So if I was to use, you know, A here, then it doesn't tell me what it's being used for. I would need to remark it up at the top and say, this is used, A is equal to distance traveled. So I'd rather you not did that. Actually, I don't want you to do that. I want you to name your variables in a descriptive manner. You may use MPG as miles per gallon because I think all of us know what that means. I don't think I would use CPG because I'm not sure that, I mean, it's cost per gallon and we know what it means because we've talked about the program, but if I haven't looked at the program at all and I'm just looking at the code, I don't know what CPG is. So you might do cost per gallon instead of CPG, just type it out. So we're going to have 3 of those. And the other thing that we mentioned, or I talked about, I think, was that none of them, these are all integers, right? So these are all defined as being integer data types, which basically means whole numbers only. So here, if the user types in a decimal number with a decimal, it's going to cause the program to crash And I think when we talked about the program, we were talking about, well, how is the user going to use it? How detailed do they want to or need the program to be? Are they going to round up or down and just use whole numbers? Or are they going to actually use decimal values? If I dimension these, or if I initialize my variables as float, which is what we call decimal, or variables, memory spots that can use decimal places. We call those float variables. If I use float here instead of int, then the user can type in a whole number or one with decimal places, and it won't crash the program. And so it's up to the user to decide how exact the program is going to be. So for all three of the variables that we're creating for user input, you should initialize them using the float data type, which basically means decimal. Okay, so it wouldn't say int, it would say float. Then we have the input function, by the way, parentheses, then input function, and then in parentheses, what the user is going to see on the screen. So it's going to be important that you remember to close both sets of parentheses at the end. So I would probably say, please input the distance traveled in miles. Right? That would be a decent question way to prompt the user for some input. And so we have three, right? We're going to do cost per gallon and we're going to do miles per gallon. So however you phrase those is up to you, but make sure that it shouldn't take very long to create this program to begin with. So don't skimp and save like 2-3 seconds because you're writing crappy input sentences. So once we have the input, then we can go to step 3, which is to do our calculations. Now, in our case, you can do the calculation. We're trying to get trip cost, right? You can do the calculation either in one equation, where you use parentheses around the division, or you can do it in 2 lines where and by the way, if you do it in 1 line, you only need 1 extra variable. If you do it in 2 lines, you have to do 2. There's not a big problem there, because if you do it in 2 lines, you got to do gallons used equals, and then you figure out the division, and then your next line would be trip cost equals, and it's gallons used times whatever, right? Reference back to the lecture and lab where I did the whole stuff on the whiteboard, where we talked about how to do the math. So that's where you're either going to do it in 1 calculation, 1 line, or 2 lines. It doesn't matter. Then lastly, we're going to display the result. And in our case, if you're doing it in 2 lines, you're getting gallons used. That's not a relevant result that we're going to display back onto the form. I just want to see the trip cost. So, and I want to see it, I don't know if you have to use based on the values entered here, but you could use something like the cost in gasoline for this trip is blah, blah, blah. Now, the blah, blah, blah is going to be whatever is here, right? So it may be called trip cost. And I want you to format it, but don't use the round function. Here it uses the round function. Basically, that's a math function that rounds up or down. So it doesn't give you any decimal places. But if the trip costs $17.24, I want to see 17.24. And if it costs $5, I want to see 5.00. And if it costs $6.50, I want to see not 6.5, but 6.50. So, and I want to see a $sign in front. So probably in the text, I'm going to do this. Where's the $sign? There. And then show the variable. And then I'm going to use the format function here, which we talked about today. And I think last time, once I started thinking about it, I think I mentioned it last time. We're going to use the format function. And then in the parentheses, we're going to have a comma, and then we're going to do that, that .2f, which basically forces 2 decimal places. So if it's $5, it's going to show up as 5.00. If it's 3.2, the calculated value, it's going to show up as 3.20. There wouldn't be any difference, I don't think, if it's 323. Oh, by the way, if it calculates the value as, you know, to the 6th decimal place, it's going to also shorten it to show only 2 decimal places. So if the trip would have cost $3.256897 dollars, right? It's going to shorten it to 2, and it will round the last decimal place up or down, up or not up, depending on what the next number is, and the next number next to that. So I want you to make sure that you do that. 2 decimal places is what I want to see. And have a sentence. You know, I don't know if you're going to have anything afterwards like this does, but at least have something before it. It's probably going to be your trip cost for this trip is blank, and then you probably don't have to say anything afterwards. The reason that this is formatted the way it is because of the kind of program it is. Remember that when you are referencing a variable that was initialized previously, this variable was initialized here, if you don't type it exactly the same way that you initialized it, it will not recognize it, and so it won't show you the contents. Okay, so you have to be careful that you write things the same way. So let's run this really quickly. Oh, yeah. And I'll just enter some values here. Right, so it's prompting me for input, and your program is going to do this 3 times. I'm just going to keep typing 70. And after the last one, so after whatever your last input is, then it's going to do the calculation and display the results immediately. And so here, based on the values entered, there are an estimated, oh, I put a $sign in there. See how the $sign shows up? Blah, 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 in our galaxy with a Z for some reason. It's Galaxy Z. And so we're going to see, you know, the cost of the trip entered is blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if we're going to do anything afterwards. Maybe you put a period. I'm not sure. So that's what our program is going to do. I'm going to get rid of this $sign. There we are. And just to make sure, save it. Good. Oh, let me show you one last thing. If you are working on the program and you save it and close it, and you want to open it again, there's 2 ways to do it. So the first way is to go to the folder where the program, the file is. So here I'm going here, and I go Drake equation, and then you right-click on it. Don't double-click on it, right-click on it. And you can do this second one, edit with idle. And then it'll open it in the idle one, and you can work on it some more. You can keep working on it. The other way is to open your idle Python environment, like this, the shell, and go File, Open, and then point to where it is. So mine's on the desktop, and Python Programs, Drake equation, and click Open, and then it'll open it here. So either way you get to the same spot. Just remember that if you do it from the file, you need to right-click on it and click Open, Edit with idle. Okay. lastly, this program will be due a week from today. So that's next Thursday. Make sure that when you log into lab, during lab, make sure that when you log into lab that you're on a computer where you can share your screen with me, where you can actually run the program. So that I can see the screen, I can run it and make sure that it works. Because that's what I'm going to do. Then I will tell you, go ahead and send me your code. So then what you're going to do is you're going to send me the code. And I haven't tested it with Python programs, but I don't think that you can actually send the program as an email attachment. So you may have to copy your code into a word processor and then attach that. But you won't send me anything until after I've seen it running. Okay, so I'll tell you, you can send it to me. But I want to see it first. So having said that, that is your assignment. And that's your first assignment.